not sure there's been much marketing around this, but The Order, starring Jude Law, Nicholas Hoult, and Tye Sheridan, it is a slow burn crime thriller that's coming to theaters and then probably soon to VOD. So should you get your tickets? As a series of bank robberies and car heists frightens communities in the Pacific Northwest, a lone FBI agent believes that the crimes were not the work of financially motivated criminals, but instead a group of dangerous domestic terrorists. This is based on true events where an FBI agent who had spent years taking on organized crime on the East Coast moves to Idaho for a quieter and hopefully safer pace of life. Once there, he discovers evidence of a growing movement of white supremacists, branching off from the others, intent on bringing true terror onto the populace. Jude Law is the FBI agent who gets an assist from a local deputy played by Tye Sheridan, and their dynamic is rough and tense, mainly because Law is more of the lone wolf type, while Sheridan is pretty green when it comes to certain styles of investigation. His local contacts and knowledge of the towns, though, it makes him an indispensable ally for Law, who comes up against complications just about everywhere he turns. Nicholas Hoult plays the charismatic and charming leader of the growing white supremacist group, taking recruits from other neo-Nazi groups and having them join his ranks. Hoult is captivating, not only because of his commanding presence, but also because he exudes this strong but pure passion, which so many others find alluring and inspiring. Now, the director was influenced to tell this story because of the insurrection that took place on January 6, 2021 in Washington, D.C. Justin Kurzel uses something in our recent present to show how those actions are very similar to what was brewing back in the early to mid-'80s. In the film story, Hoult and his other followers use a book, this fictionalized tale of a disillusioned white man who rose up to take back what he felt was his, by following this certain number of calculated steps. Now, I appreciate how the film shows the indoctrination of the children of these supremacists because they read the books to their kids as if it were a Dick and Jane book. It showcases the grooming these parents do to train their kids to not only hate those that are different, but also to show them the steps to follow in ever-increasing violence so that new ranks are always going to be ready to join. Now, it kind of made it sound like the film is very preachy about this topic and even about January 6th, but it's not. While the elements surrounding the growing white supremacist movement in the PNW at that time are highlighted and maybe even focused on for a bit, the commentary, it's fairly light and skimpily presented. Instead, the film uses these groups to give us a crime thriller, this slow burn, patiently building tense drama that works towards an explosive conclusion. I'd liken this to a modern Western, at least in the pacing and how you have a lone lawman hot on the trail of some thieves. And because what initially draws Law into this case is a string of bank robberies, which then begins to uncover the group progressing through the steps in their guidebook. If you've seen Hell or High Water, this has some of that same type of mounting intensity, where there isn't mystery or even huge amounts of action, but instead the personalities in pursuit create the suspense and tension. And that's what this film excels at. I was on the edge of my seat through a good portion of the movie. Not all at first, and not all at once. I was just kind of creeping my way towards the edge of the seat as each scenario played out. And again, these typically weren't massive action sequences, even though there are action set pieces. It's the determined hunt and the chase then that spans most of the story that makes it riveting. Now, I love how there is also this ongoing parallel within the storyline of Law being the hunter. He's in the mountains and goes there to fish and hunt, having his eye on this massive buck, or maybe it's an elk. I don't know, I'm not a hunter. But he's slowly following until he has it right in his crosshairs, or he spooks it because of his scent or a sound. And this directly mirrors his relationship with Hoult. While Law might get close, there's still the chance of spooking the bad guys into acting early, or changing their plan altogether. Now, if you don't like modern westerns or you aren't in the mood for a story with a creeping but measured pace, this isn't going to be much fun. There are scenes that stretch for minutes without any sort of dialogue, sometimes even with only the slightest of movement from a character. Now, thankfully, in these times, not only do we get insight into a character's psyche through their expressions and their movements, but we're also treated to beautiful cinematography that captures the stunning environments and landscapes. I mean, the whole production has a massive and airy feel to it, where the sheer amount of open space just dwarfs the characters, and it provides an almost unlimited amount of area to hide or escape to. It's also a bit emotionally confusing to be viewing these gorgeous terrains and have them juxtaposed with a horrifically disgusting racist set of beliefs. I mean, it's tough to imagine how such hate could find a home in someplace so beautiful, But as a resident of Northern California and one who knows a bit about the socio-political climate in Idaho, Eastern Washington, Eastern Oregon, and Northeastern California, when the location of the supremacist groups was mentioned within the film, it didn't come as any sort of shock or surprise. And in fact, it just tracked perfectly. Now, simply based on the story content, this is inherently a melancholy storyline. There were some shocking moments that took my breath away, even though I was pretty sure they were going to happen. The tragedy that encompasses this plot, it's palpable, but it feels earned also. We're given the right amount of background development on the key characters, creating depth and nuance to their personalities, building the personas so that they're not just merely good guys or bad guys, but ones who have emotional connections to those around them. And this was powerful, even for Hoult's character, because for as repulsive as his beliefs were and how despicable many of his actions were, he still came across as human rather than a pure monster. That also reflected in how Law pursued him. I mean, sure, Hoult was the prey, but Law wasn't devoid of emotion, so it wasn't a cold-blooded chase that was intent on killing Hoult, instead looking to preserve life so that justice could be administered. So overall, if you're hoping for a social commentary on racism, white supremacy, or even the events of January 6th, this won't fulfill that need. There are small traces of discourse there, but The Order excels at presenting an increasingly tense, character-driven crime thriller supported by three powerful talents. Jude Law, Nicholas Hoult, and Tye Sheridan are spectacular in their portrayals, creating believably complex characters through mesmerizing performances. The pacing is slow, but deliberate, adding moments of intrigue, anxiety, and dread that lead to an expectantly thrilling finale. If this wasn't on your radar and you enjoy an unhurried thrill ride, give this one a go. There's no sex or nudity, a ton of profanity, and a bunch of violence. I give The Order 4 out of 5 couches. So what's a patient thriller or maybe a modern Western that you enjoy? I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.